Welcome to Poetic Technique. Today we'll be talking about audience. I know a man. As I said to my friend, because I am always talking, John, I said, which was not his name, darkness surrounds us. What can we do against it? Or else, shall we? And why not? Buy a goddamn big car. Drive, he said. For Christ's sake, look out where you're going. Love this poem. It's so short, and yet we have two different people speaking. We have at least three audiences in mind. The speaker of the poem has his friend to whom he was speaking in mind. John has the speaker of the poem in mind. Or not John, has the speaker of the poem in mind. And then the speaker has us, whoever is reading this poem. He lets us know he ain't worth much in terms of reliability. The way that he breaks up each line as if to suggest this sort of hesitation and memory. John, which was not his name. The way that he even breaks up a word surrounds us, as if to suggest not just a hesitation and memory, but also like the gravity of this subject. The speaker is concerned. He is surrounded by darkness. He is contemplating something profound, profoundly emotional at least. And then we have a totally different figure coming in with a different attitude, and not John responds, "Oh, for Christ's sake, just look out where you're going." I love that. I love that juxtaposition between the very serious poet type in this work of art and the other type who's like, artsy fartsy, blah blah blah, wine all day, mowing about the state of the nation. Or you could just realize you're already in the car going, you're already driving. Just get to it. Try not to hit anything when you're on the road. Some poems come forward with this super conversational language. You'll notice that, especially when we start to talk about gestures, this poem has a primarily narrative thrust. I said, he said, a thing happened, it moved temporally. What we'll see is that a lot of even the so-called atemporal poetic gestures, things like lyric, or we just wrote dramatic monologues, for example, are always situated in time, even when it's just contained in the language. Oh my, okay, so we just got to the park, and I guess it's a weekend because we have all sorts of people around us today. So I'm going to do my best to find a shady spot where we can start hunting for mushrooms and talk about the rest of these poems. See you in a sec. I was worried we were gonna come all the way out here and not find any mushrooms, but look, Archie and I came down here, and right off the bat, what did we find, Archie? We found some chanterelles. You see them? They're so pretty. All right, I'm gonna grab a couple of these and then get talking to you. Yes. Look at this sucker. Oh my God, we're gonna be so cute. What you look for, you see the way that those little lines are all squiggly? And you look for that, you look for them to have this kind of funky amorphous shape, squiggly lines on the bottom of them, on the underneath, and for them to grow near each other, but independently. All right, now that I have my lunch for the day, let's flip through some of these real quick and see why the heck I chose to include them in the packet. I want to look at Today by Frank O'Hara, another short one. Today. Oh, Kangaroos, sequins, chocolate sodas, you really are beautiful. Pearls, harmonicas, jujubes, aspirins, all the stuff they've always talked about, still makes a poem surprise. These things are with us every day, even on beachheads and in beers. They do have meaning. They're strong as rocks. Implied audience here, there's no specific address. Oh, that's not true at all. So who's the addressee of this poem? Well, it's apostrophic addresses to inanimate objects. I'm trying to figure out where the camera is. Okay. This speaker of this poem is literally talking to kangaroos and jujubes and chocolate sodas, so I guess not all inanimate, and celebrating them. How does this affect the way the poem's constructed? Well, in this case, we have another list. It's a list of addressees. It's a list of objects that the poem takes into consideration as being indicative of a change in the way that we can see poems. Frank O'Hara's argument in this poem is basically, this is stuff that's always been around, this is stuff that we've always seen but never took seriously enough. All right, and I'm going to just kind of move real quickly forward here. The Red Wheelbarrow by William Carlos Williams. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rain, water, beside the white chickens. One of the most famous poems of the 20th century. It is 6 lines long. How many words? 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 words long. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rain, water, beside the white chickens. Implied addressee here. There is no explicit audience. This is a poem written upon the occasion of this consideration. Williams' argument being about objects, their centrality to the meaning of poems. If you want to learn more about the poem and want a more precise argument than the one that I just gave you, go for it. But let's flip to the other side of this packet and see Mary Ruefle's response, which was published in Poetry Magazine just this past year. Read, I fucking depended on you, and you left the fucking wheelbarrow out, and it's fucking raining, and now the white chickens are fucking filthy. All right, so we've got a specific addressee here in mind. Mary Ruefle's speaker is writing to at least the speaker of William Carlos Williams' poems, if not Williams himself. And how do you take this poem? Well, people are going to take it different ways, just as they took Williams' poem different ways. They're going to take it that she's being playful and flippant. I think in a poem this short, that's this explicitly addressed to Williams, that she intentionally published in Poetry Magazine, probably she's saying something a little bit more significant. We're not going to dive all the way into what the complications of those arguments might be, because this is not an intro to poetry class. However, what might be interesting to you to note is that one of these poems has an implicit addressee. The other one explicitly calls that person out for only having an implicit addressee, for only having implicit arguments or interior arguments. Let's keep looking. I'll give you one more example to look at real quickly, which is Paige Lewis's poem, You Can Take Off Your Sweater, I've Made Today Warm. They read this poem much more eloquently than I'm going to be able to, and if you want to see that, you can go to the Poetry Foundation website and find Paige reading their poem, but I'll do my best here. You can take off your sweater, I've made today warm. Sit on the park bench and chew this mint leaf. Right now, way above your head, 2 men floating in a rocket ship are ignoring their delicate experiments, their buttons flashing red. Watching you chew your mint, the men forget about their gritty toothpaste, about their fingers numb from lack of gravity. They see you and, for the first time since liftoff, think home. When they were boys, they were gentle and smart. One could tie a string around a fly without cinching it in half. One wrote tales of sailors who drowned after mistaking the backs of whales for islands. Does it matter which man is which? They just quit their mission for you. They're on their way down. You'll take both men, a winter husband and a summer husband. Doesn't matter which is. Don't slump like that. Get up. We have so much work to do before. Wait, you're going the wrong way. Small whelp of a woman, this is not how we behave. Where are you going? This world is already willing to give you anything. Do you want to know Latin? Okay, now everyone here knows Latin. Want inflatable deer? Deer. I promise the winter, summer children will barely hurt, dear. I'm hurt that you would ever think I don't glisten to you. I'm always glistening. Tame your voice and Turn around. The men are coming. They've traded everything for you. The Jimmy starlight, the click, click, click of the universe expanding. Stop. Aren't you known? Aren't you known here? How can you be certain that anywhere else will provide more pears than you could ever eat? Remember the sweet rot of it all. Come back. You forgot your sweater. What if there's nothing there when you don't have your sweater? What if it's cold? Who do we think the addressee is in this poem? Is the speaker talking to a version of themselves? Is the speaker talking to an idealized version of a self that's projected upon them? Is the speaker talking to a generic concept of a person? Are they speaking to a beloved? What do we think? How does knowing or not knowing the specific parameters of the addressee affect how you read this poem? To what extent? And where it doesn't affect how you read the poem, what carries the poem instead? What carries its specificity? And where it does impact the way that you think of this poem, how is that built into the language? And then one last poem, Loving in the War Years by Cherríe Morara. Loving you is like living in the war years. I do think of Bogart and Bergman, not clear who's who, but still singing a long, smoky mood into the piano bar, drinks straight up, the last bottle in the house, while bombs split outside a broken world. World war going on, but you and I still insisting in each our own heads, still thinking how, if I could only make some contact with that woman across the keyboard, we size each other up. Yes. Loving you has this kind of desperation to it, like do or die. I, having eyed you from the first time you made the decision to move from your stool to live dangerously. All on the hunch that in our exchange of photos of old girlfriends' names, of cities and memories back in the States, the fronts we've manned out here on the continent, all this on a hunch that this time there'll be no need for resistance. Loving in the war years calls for this kind of risking without a home to call our own. I've got to take you as you come, battle bruised, refusing our enemy, fear. We're all we've got, you and I, maintaining this wartime morality where being queer and female is as bad as we can get. The thing I really want to drive home in having you look at these poems is that the audience of the poem doesn't have to be made explicit. It doesn't have to be human. It can be pretty much anyone or anything you want it to be. And yet one should write every poem with a speaker, with an addressee, intentionally in mind. When I started writing poems, I had no concern whatsoever with who was reading it, because no one was reading it. I had no intention of ever sharing my writing with anybody, other than, you know, maybe that person I was trying to impress in school. I just found a pill on the ground or something. I shouldn't touch that. But one of the first pieces of feedback that I got when I sent a poem out to a hero poet of mine, basically, who is this for? Is this a diary entry? You know, is anyone else expected to care about this? And then in the marginalia, in the notes in the marginalia, they're like, at this point in the poem, I've given up reading because the speaker doesn't care about the reader. So why should I care about the poem? And that's the question. Why should your reader care about your poem? And some of the ways that you can give them access to the poem and help them care is by having them identify with the speaker or having them identify with the intended addressee. And let's go home, turn these mushrooms into some sort of food, and see if there's anything else we need to look at. Saute onion and olive oil until medium soft. Add about 14 ounces of your clean chanterelle mushrooms to the pan. Give the mushrooms time to release their juices, like so, like that, and wait until they've soaked them back up. Now that the juices are soaked back up, go ahead and add your thyme, salt, garlic, cooking cream. I use an oat-based creamer. Nice and thick, still vegan. Tablespoon of soy sauce if you're nasty. Now while you cook those liquids down, go ahead and get your pasta boiling. And we're cooked down. Let's throw a little cornstarch in there, thicken her up. No more than a tablespoon should do. And there you have it, creamy vegan chanterelle pasta. A final word on addressee or audience. Your addressee comes to the poem, whether they're implicit or they're explicit, with desires and expectations. For instance, let's say the addressee or the audience is coming to a video expecting to learn about poetry. And instead what they get is a random hodgepodge of useless information on foraging and how to make a pasta with that foraged produce. It's going to be weird, isn't it? It's a little bit off-putting, might even make them stop reading, stop watching the video. That's the last thing to keep in mind is not only should you be intentional about who you're choosing for your addressee or for your audience, but also the fact that they're coming to this poem with desires of their own and expectations. So as you write these poems, how are you meeting those expectations? How are you ignoring or denying them? That's it for this one. Look forward to seeing y'all's exercises, and I'll see you in a couple of days with the next video on the ode. Bye.